Sentences are not born fully formed. They don't pop into existence on their own and jump onto the pages of papers directly from students' minds. Sentences are built. Much like anything else, sentences are comprised of smaller pieces. The smallest of these pieces are words, which when combined into small groups form clauses. There are two main types of clauses used to construct sentences: independent clauses, which can stand on their own as sentences, and dependent clauses, which are missing at least one key component of a sentence, and therefore depend on another clause to complete their meaning. Mastering the difference between independent and dependent clauses is the key to building effective, interesting, and most importantly, grammatically correct sentences. In order for a clause to be considered independent, it needs to have three things: a subject, a verb, and a complete thought. Believe it or not, an independent clause may be comprised as little as 2 words. For example, she runs. Alternately, a clause comprised of many words may be dependent and unable to stand on its own as a sentence. Take this clause: because I was hungry unreasonably early on a frozen Tuesday morning in November. 13 words later, we still do not have a complete sentence. The problem is, this clause does not present us with a complete thought. What happened because of the writer's hunger? The idea is left unfinished. Clauses such as, because I was hungry, or racing down the street, do not make sense on their own. They are dependent on another clause in order to complete their meaning. Because I was hungry, I ate lunch. I saw the 3-legged dog racing down the street. The most common way to combine independent clauses is to use a coordinating conjunction. There are 7 conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Conjunctions act as a bridge, combining clauses into a unified sentence. There is only one simple rule to remember when using a coordinating conjunction. When a conjunction is used to combine 2 independent clauses, it will be preceded by a comma. If the clause following the conjunction is dependent and cannot stand on its own as a sentence, there is no need for the comma. These types of sentences will look like this: Mary went to the store, comma, and she bought milk. In this example, both clauses, Mary went to the store and she bought milk, make sense on their own. They are independent. We have combined them using the conjunction and. If we change the second clause slightly and remove the subject, in this case the pronoun she, the second clause no longer makes sense on its own. It becomes a dependent clause. Since the second clause in our adjusted example is now dependent, we no longer need to use a comma. The conjunction is strong enough to combine these clauses by itself. The sentence will now look like this: Mary went to the store and bought milk. A run-on sentence occurs when 2 independent clauses are combined without using any punctuation at all. It looks like this: Mary went to the store, she bought milk. Each of these clauses could stand on its own as a sentence. A comma splice is basically the same idea, but instead of using no punctuation at all, a comma is used by itself, like this: Mary went to the store, comma, she bought milk. A comma is not strong enough to combine 2 independent clauses. It needs a conjunction to help it. Subordination will add a level of diversity to your sentences, making them more interesting and less repetitive. A clause is subordinate if it contains a subordinating conjunction. Words such as because, although, while, if, when, unless, and since are extremely common in both everyday speech and college-level writing. These words are called subordinating conjunctions because they make any clause they appear in dependent or subordinate to another clause in the same sentence. Think back to our example, because I was hungry. On its own, this clause does not complete a thought. The word because is the reason for this. If we remove the word because, the clause could stand on its own. I was hungry. This is a complete sentence, so by adding the subordinating conjunction because, we make the clause subordinate or dependent. Once again, there is only one simple rule to remember when using subordinate or dependent clauses. If the dependent clause begins the sentence, there must be a comma after it, followed by the independent clause that finishes the thought. The pattern looks like this: because I was hungry, comma, I ate lunch. If the independent clause comes first, there's no need for the comma. I ate lunch because I was hungry. Fragmented sentences, or simply fragments, are incomplete thoughts that are presented as complete sentences. They often occur by adding a period where a comma should go, between an independent clause and a dependent clause. For example, Mary went to the store, riding her bike quickly to avoid being chased down by the three-legged dog. Our first clause, Mary went to the store, is a complete thought, an independent clause. However, riding her bike quickly to avoid being chased down by the three-legged dog is not a complete thought. Read that first clause by itself. Although it contains many words, it does not tell the reader who is riding her bike quickly. The clause is missing its subject. It is dependent on the first clause in order to make sense. Luckily, this mistake is easy to fix. By replacing the period with a comma, we connect the fragment to the clause it depends on, forming a complete thought and a grammatically correct sentence. Mary went to the store, comma, riding her bike quickly to avoid being chased down by the three-legged dog. There you have it, sentences in all their glory. It's a good idea to practice a few of these patterns and to vary their use in your writing. Using the same pattern over and over will cause your readers the same sort of boredom you just experienced watching this video.